Why is it that the most ruthless, cunning, and manipulative individuals often rise to the top? While good people struggle, those who lie, deceive, and exploit seem to dominate the world. Was Nietzsche right when he claimed that morality itself is a tool of the weak, and that power belongs to those willing to take it? In this video, we will unravel Nietzsche's unsettling perspective on power, morality, and success, revealing a truth so disturbing that it might change the way you see the world forever. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may force you to question everything you believe about good and evil. From an early age, we are conditioned to believe that certain virtues, like kindness, humility, and honesty, are the cornerstones of a successful and meaningful life. Society tells us that these qualities will bring us respect, love, and ultimately success. We are encouraged to practice these ideals because they are seen as the right way to live. However, Nietzsche challenges this notion and presents a more unsettling theory. He argues that morality, as we understand it, is not a natural or universal truth, but rather a construct created by the weak to control the strong. Nietzsche called this construct slave morality. It's a set of values that glorifies traits that are typically associated with weakness, selflessness, humility, and compassion. According to Nietzsche, these values were created by those who lacked the strength or power to dominate others, so they turned to moral frameworks that would protect them from the stronger individuals around them. The idea was simple. By devaluing strength, power, and dominance, the weak could level the playing field and make those who possessed these traits seem morally corrupt. The paradox is clear. Morality, which we think of as the measure of our goodness, is often a tool of the powerless. Those who adhere to these values place themselves at a disadvantage in a world where power is the ultimate currency. When the powerful rise, they do so by breaking the rules of morality. They reject traditional virtues like humility and sacrifice, replacing them with traits like ambition, strength, and control. For Nietzsche, morality is simply a tool for survival, and it serves the interests of those who have little else to offer but moralizing ideals. In this framework, those who embrace master morality, the values of strength, power, and self-determination, are the true agents of success. But before we get into that, it's important to recognize the way slave morality keeps us chained. The moment we buy into this moral framework, we become complicit in our own disempowerment. This isn't to say that virtues like compassion and kindness are inherently bad, but Nietzsche believed they were often used as crutches to avoid facing the harsh reality of life. And in doing so, these ideals limit our potential and our ability to rise to the top. To succeed in life, we need to accept the uncomfortable truth. Traditional morality is often a hindrance, not a help. By embracing a more honest approach to life, one that isn't blinded by the comforting narrative of good and evil, we can begin to see the true nature of power. Only then can we start to understand why the evil people who operate outside the rules of conventional morality often succeed where others fail. Nietzsche's concept of the will to power is one of the most controversial ideas in his philosophy, and it helps explain why those who embrace ruthlessness and self-interest often rise to the top. At its core, the will to power is the drive to assert oneself, to expand one's influence, and to become the strongest version of oneself possible. It is not about merely surviving, it's about thriving and dominating the environment in which you live. For Nietzsche, life itself is a struggle for power. Everything in existence, whether it's a plant fighting for sunlight or a human striving for wealth and influence, is driven by this fundamental force. Success, in this view, is not about moral righteousness or being good in the traditional sense. It's about mastering your environment, asserting your will, and doing whatever it takes to come out on top. The people who succeed, according to Nietzsche, are those who do not shy away from this struggle. They understand that life is a battleground, and they are determined to fight for dominance. In Nietzsche's view, the concept of morality often works as a restraint, something that holds people back from fully embracing their will to power. Goodness, in the traditional sense, may compel individuals to feel guilt about their desires, to suppress their true ambitions, or to behave in ways that prevent them from achieving greatness. The truly powerful individuals, on the other hand, recognize that morality is a tool to be discarded when it stands in the way of their personal growth and success. The individuals who succeed in this world are not those who adhere to the conventional virtues of honesty, kindness, and self-sacrifice. Instead, they are the ones who are unafraid to embrace their darker desires, who use cunning, manipulation, and even cruelty to achieve their goals. It's not about being malicious for the sake of malice. It's about recognizing that in a world where power is everything, the willingness to take what you want, regardless of traditional moral boundaries, is the key to survival and success. These individuals are able to assert their will over others, bending situations and people to their desires. They may not play by the rules of morality, but in doing so, they craft a path to success that the good people, those who follow the rules, cannot follow. In a world where the weak are always at a disadvantage, the strong must push past the constraints of traditional morality in order to thrive. The will to power is not a mere desire to win, it is the very essence of what it means to exist. Those who succeed are those who tap into this deep primal urge without hesitation or guilt. Nietzsche's concept of master morality reveals how power structures are built. The master morality is not concerned with the concepts of good or evil as defined by society. Instead, it focuses on what is useful for the individual's pursuit of greatness. For those who operate with this mindset, there is no shame in pursuing self-interest, no guilt in seeking personal power. Master morality is about embracing life in all its complexity, recognizing that success requires a willingness to take risks, to act decisively, and to bend others to your will. Master morality doesn't reject kindness or virtue, but it places those values in the context of what benefits the individual. Strength, self-assertion, and independence are the core of this moral framework. It doesn't care about the suffering of others, not out of malice, but because the strong recognize that their success must come first. In a world driven by power dynamics, being too concerned with morality can hold one back from achieving greatness. To succeed in this world, you must understand that traditional ideas of goodness will not help you. Nietzsche's theory challenges the very foundation of morality as we know it. While many will continue to worship ideals of virtue, those who are truly powerful will operate outside those constraints. They will exploit every opportunity, manipulate every system, and use every advantage at their disposal to secure their dominance. It is this terrifying truth that Nietzsche forces us to confront. The people who rise are not those who follow the rules, but those who break them without remorse. Nietzsche's distinction between slave morality and master morality forms one of the most critical aspects of his philosophy, offering a profound understanding of how power dynamics shape the world. To truly grasp why the evil often succeed, it's essential to explore how these two moral systems operate and clash with one another. Slave morality, according to Nietzsche, originates from the oppressed, the weak, and those who feel powerless in society. It's a reactive morality, formed as a defense against those who have power and control. The individuals who subscribe to this form of morality value humility, kindness, patience, and selflessness. These traits are seen as virtues, something to aspire to, but they are not traits that lend themselves to success in a world governed by power struggles. Instead, they often serve as tools for survival in a system that rewards strength, dominance, and ambition. The key idea behind slave morality is that it defines itself in opposition to the powerful. Those who practice slave morality are typically the ones who have been marginalized, oppressed, or denied power, and so they create a moral framework that justifies their situation. It flips the traditional understanding of good and evil on its head. What is considered good is that which allows the oppressed to endure and survive, while evil is associated with the traits of those who have power: arrogance, dominance, cruelty, and the willingness to impose one's will on others. Thus, slave morality defines goodness as meekness, submission, and empathy, while those who exhibit power are seen as inherently bad. Slave morality was, in Nietzsche's view, an ingenious invention. It allowed those who lacked power to exert some form of control over the stronger individuals. By elevating the virtues of weakness, humility, meekness, and patience, the oppressed were able to make the dominant class feel guilty about their strength. This shift made the powerful hesitant, forced them to question their actions, and created a sense of moral obligation to serve the needs of the weak. In this sense, slave morality was an early form of social control, one that would later become deeply embedded in religious and philosophical systems. But Nietzsche saw the consequences of this moral shift as far-reaching and devastating. Slave morality, despite being a product of oppression, became the dominant moral framework that shaped the course of Western thought. Christianity, for instance, reinforced these values: meekness, self-sacrifice, and the idea that the powerful should serve the weak. Over time, these principles became so entrenched that they began to define what it meant to be good in society, and anyone who deviated from these norms was condemned as evil. In a world where these values were considered the height of moral excellence, the powerful who rejected them became demonized, while the weak were celebrated. Master morality, in contrast, arises from the strong, the powerful, and those who are capable of shaping their own destinies. It is not defined in opposition to anything, rather, it is an affirmation of strength and self-will. Those who adhere to master morality value qualities such as ambition, courage, assertiveness, and independence. They are not concerned with serving others or adhering to the rules established by weaker individuals. Instead, they are focused on achieving their own goals and realizing their fullest potential. For the master, morality is not something that is externally imposed, but something that emerges from within, based on the individual's will to create, to dominate, and to assert their place in the world. Master morality is fundamentally about self-determination. It is the morality of those who are capable of imposing their own values onto the world, who see the world not as a battleground of competing virtues, but as a space where they can assert their own vision. These individuals are not concerned with being liked or admired. Their focus is on achieving their own greatness, regardless of what others think. In Nietzsche's view, the true masters of society are those who are able to transcend conventional morality entirely and define their own existence, regardless of societal standards. The clash between slave morality and master morality is not simply an intellectual battle, it is a battle for control of society's values. Slave morality, with its emphasis on humility, self-sacrifice, and empathy, serves to restrain the powerful, to impose guilt and shame on those who seek to assert their own will. It is a morality of subjugation which favors the weak and the oppressed. Master morality, on the other hand, encourages the strong to break free from these chains and to act according to their own desires and vision. This is where Nietzsche's terrifying truth begins to reveal itself. In a world shaped by slave morality, the individuals who succeed are those who have the courage to embrace master morality, to rise above the constraints of traditional virtue, and to take what they want, no matter the cost. What makes this clash even more significant is that slave morality has been institutionalized in modern society. It has permeated our legal systems, our education systems, and our social norms. The principles of fairness, equality, and justice, while seemingly virtuous, are often rooted in the values of slave morality. These ideas were created to protect the powerless and ensure that they could survive in a world where the powerful might otherwise trample them. While these ideas have undoubtedly brought about positive changes in society, they have also made it increasingly difficult for individuals to rise to the top without adhering to an imposed moral code. In a world governed by the values of slave morality, those who reject these values are often vilified. The successful, the ambitious, and the strong are accused of selfishness, greed, and ruthlessness. But Nietzsche saw these qualities not as flaws, but as necessary traits for those who seek to assert their will and shape their own destiny. He argued that the modern world, with its obsession with equality and fairness, often punishes those who have the audacity to pursue their own goals and rise above the constraints of conventional morality. The battle between slave morality and master morality is not merely a philosophical one. It is the battle that shapes the lives of every individual striving for success. In a world that values submission over self-assertion, those who seek to dominate must learn to navigate these moral frameworks with skill and precision. To succeed in such a world, one must understand the forces at play, recognize how morality has been weaponized, and be willing to transcend the conventional definitions of good and evil. In doing so, one can begin to understand why evil people often succeed, while the good remain stuck in a perpetual struggle for survival. To break free from the limitations of slave morality, individuals must embrace their own strength and will to power. Only then can they truly rise above the pack, creating a life that is entirely their own, independent of the moral judgments of others. This is the unsettling truth that Nietzsche reveals. The world of success is a world of power, and those who are unwilling to claim their own power will always be at the mercy of those who are willing to embrace the darkness of master morality. If morality is the framework that tells us how to live virtuously, why do so many good people fail to achieve the success they desire in life? Why do those who follow the traditional rules of kindness and humility seem to get left behind, while others who embrace ruthlessness and self-interest climb to the top? Nietzsche's unsettling insight into this problem lies in his critique of traditional morality and how it stifles those who adhere to it, preventing them from fully realizing their potential. The tragedy of the good person, in Nietzsche's view, is that they are not only bound by the moral framework that rewards selflessness and sacrifice, but also confined by an emotional and psychological framework that makes them susceptible to their own feelings of guilt, shame, and self-doubt. Those who live according to the values of slave morality often struggle with the very concept of self-interest. In a world that elevates the importance of caring for others, of putting the needs of others first, the good person is often unable to assert their own desires and ambitions, trapped in a cycle of self-sacrifice that leads them nowhere. In this context, Nietzsche sees a tragic flaw in the virtuous: their failure to assert their own will and desire for power. By focusing so much on morality and the needs of others, the good person becomes emotionally and psychologically restricted, unable to act in ways that would allow them to rise above their circumstances. The virtuous individual often goes through life feeling that they are not worthy of success or happiness because they have not lived up to the ideal of selflessness. They become passive in the face of life's challenges, believing that by subordinating themselves to the needs of others, they are somehow fulfilling their moral obligations. The problem with this, according to Nietzsche, is that by failing to assert their own will, the good person effectively rejects their own power. They become so focused on doing what is right in the eyes of others, on meeting societal expectations of moral behavior, that they fail to recognize that their own desires, ambitions, and strengths are just as important. Rather than take control of their lives and shape their own futures, they submit to the wishes of others, perpetuating a cycle of mediocrity and unfulfilled potential. This self-sacrificial mentality might seem virtuous on the surface, but in the eyes of Nietzsche, it is ultimately self-defeating. The more the good person places themselves at the service of others, the more they give up their own power and autonomy. This is why the good often fail. Their adherence to traditional morality comes at the expense of their ability to take charge of their own lives and create the kind of future they desire. In a world driven by power dynamics, Those who are unwilling to assert their own will are doomed to remain in the background while others dominate. Another crucial factor in why good people fail is their inability to embrace the full spectrum of human emotion and experience. Nietzsche believed that human beings are complex creatures, capable of both great good and great evil. The suppression of any part of our nature, especially the darker aspects, leads to an imbalance that inhibits personal growth and success. The good person, in their desire to adhere to moral ideals, suppresses their own desires, fears, and ambitions, believing that to do so is the path to righteousness. However, by denying these essential parts of themselves, they effectively limit their ability to fully engage with the world and to act decisively in their own self-interest. In contrast, those who embrace the darker, more ruthless aspects of their nature, the master moralists, are able to act with clarity and strength. They do not shy away from their desires, nor do they feel guilt or shame about their ambitions. They understand that life is a struggle for power, and that in order to succeed, they must harness every part of themselves, including the traits that society deems evil or immoral. While the good person is paralyzed by their moral conscience, the powerful individual is able to move forward, using every opportunity, every resource, and every advantage at their disposal to achieve success. But this doesn't mean that the master moralist is devoid of all moral values. It simply means that their values are not determined by society's conventional standards of good and evil. Instead, they are guided by a deeper, more personal code that is rooted in strength, self-assertion, and the will to power. This code doesn't rely on guilt or shame to shape behavior. It's based on a commitment to personal growth and the pursuit of one's own potential. The master moralist is not concerned with the judgments of others, but with their own vision of greatness. They understand that in order to achieve greatness, they must break free from the constraints of traditional morality, including the limitations imposed by feelings of guilt, shame, and fear of judgment. The tragedy of the good person is that they are often unaware of the ways in which they are sabotaging their own success. They believe that by adhering to traditional moral values, they are becoming better people and creating a better world. In reality, they are being held back by a set of ideals that prevent them from tapping into their full potential. The good person is often caught in a cycle of self-denial, where they push aside their own desires in favor of the needs of others, believing that this is the path to true virtue. But by doing so, they surrender their power and leave themselves vulnerable to those who are willing to embrace the darker side of human nature. This is not to say that the good person is doomed to failure. It's simply that they must recognize the limitations of traditional morality and the way it keeps them from embracing their true potential. Nietzsche's philosophy encourages individuals to step outside of conventional moral frameworks and reclaim their power. By confronting their own desires and ambitions head-on, by rejecting the guilt and shame that often accompany self-interest, the good person can learn to act with strength, clarity, and confidence. Ultimately, the reason good people fail is because they do not fully understand the nature of power. Power is not something that is granted to you by others. It is something you must claim for yourself. In order to succeed, you must stop viewing power as something immoral or corrupt, and begin to see it as a natural and necessary part of life. The good person must learn to embrace their own strength, to assert their will, and to pursue their own desires without hesitation or guilt. Only then can they rise above the limitations of traditional morality and begin to achieve the success they deserve. If good people can learn to accept their own desires and ambitions and stop repressing the very aspects of themselves that will lead them to greatness, they can break free from the cycle of failure. They will finally be able to take control of their lives, assert their own power, and become the strong, confident individuals they were always meant to be. But to do so, they must first reject the comforting but ultimately limiting narrative of conventional morality and embrace the harsh reality of the struggle for power. Only then will they be able to rise to the top where they belong. One of Nietzsche's most controversial and terrifying truths about power is the idea that success is often rooted in the capacity to transcend traditional moral codes and embrace a ruthless, self-serving approach to life. This unsettling reality can be difficult to accept because it directly challenges the conventional wisdom that morality and virtue are the keys to success. Yet, Nietzsche's examination of power dynamics suggests that those who are able to break free from the shackles of conventional morality and who are willing to embrace a more utilitarian and opportunistic mindset are often the ones who rise to the top. Power, in Nietzsche's worldview, is not about being good in the conventional sense of the word. It is not about living according to society's ethical standards of kindness, generosity, or altruism. Instead, power is about self-assertion, the ability to create your own values, and the strength to impose those values on the world around you. Those who succeed, according to Nietzsche, are the ones who understand that life is a constant struggle for dominance, and that only those who are willing to fight for their place in the world can achieve greatness. This is where Nietzsche's concept of the will to power becomes particularly crucial. The will to power is the fundamental drive that pushes individuals to assert themselves, to transcend their circumstances, and to impose their will upon the world. It is the force that propels individuals to achieve greatness, regardless of the obstacles in their way. Those who are successful are the ones who have harnessed this force and directed it toward their own goals. They are not concerned with whether their actions are considered moral or immoral by society. They are focused on achieving their vision and fulfilling their potential, no matter the cost. In the context of success, this means that those who are willing to embrace their own desires and ambitions, without apology or hesitation, are the ones who can navigate the world with the kind of clarity and conviction that others lack. It is not enough to simply follow the rules and live a good life. Success requires the ability to break those rules when necessary, to take risks, and to engage in actions that others might consider ruthless or even immoral. Nietzsche believed that morality, in its conventional form, often serves as a constraint on individuals, preventing them from fully realizing their potential. Take, for example, the ruthless businessman, the cutthroat politician, or the charismatic leader who rises to power despite the moral judgments placed upon them. These individuals are not bound by the traditional moral values that dictate how one should behave. Instead, they are guided by an inner sense of purpose and an unwavering commitment to their own goals. They do not feel guilty for using others to achieve their aims, nor do they concern themselves with the judgment of society. They understand that power is not given to the meek and self-sacrificing. It is seized by those who are willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead. This is a stark contrast to the good person who is constantly struggling with feelings of guilt, shame, and self-doubt. The good person, following the tenets of slave morality, is often paralyzed by their own moral conscience, unable to act decisively or assertively because they are constantly concerned with whether their actions will be deemed virtuous or immoral. They allow society's moral framework to control them, preventing them from fully realizing their potential and taking the necessary risks to achieve success. The terrifying truth here is that those who succeed in a world driven by power are often those who are willing to embrace the darker side of human nature, the side that others are afraid to acknowledge. They understand that life is not a moral playground where everyone is rewarded for good behavior, but rather a brutal arena where only the strong survive. In this arena, strength is not about physical power alone. It is about the ability to manipulate, to persuade, to dominate, and to impose one's will on others. Those who are successful are not afraid to use their intelligence, their charm, or their ruthlessness to achieve their goals. This is not to say that the successful person is inherently evil in a moral sense. It is simply that they operate outside of the moral codes that govern most people's behavior. They are not constrained by the societal expectations of kindness, empathy, or selflessness. Instead, they embrace a more pragmatic approach to life, one that acknowledges the inherent struggle for power and understands that success requires boldness, decisiveness, and a willingness to take risks. Moreover, Nietzsche believed that the conventional moral codes, particularly those rooted in slave morality, ultimately serve to suppress human creativity and greatness. By elevating virtues like humility and self-sacrifice, society discourages individuals from pursuing their own greatness and realizing their full potential. This suppression of the self leads to a kind of existential paralysis, where individuals are unable to break free from the expectations of others and assert their own vision of success. The world, according to Nietzsche, is not a place where those who meekly follow the rules are rewarded. It is a place where those who are willing to challenge the status quo, to reject the moral codes that govern society, and to assert their own power are the ones who succeed. This brutal truth is not just about individual success. It also speaks to the way power structures operate within society. Those who rise to the top in any field, whether in business, politics, or entertainment, are often those who are willing to do whatever it takes to get there. They are not concerned with being liked or respected by others. They are focused on achieving their own vision and dominating the field they are in. This often means using others as stepping stones, exploiting opportunities, and playing by a different set of rules than the rest of society. For those who are unwilling to embrace this kind of mindset, the path to success can seem elusive. The good person, bound by the chains of moral righteousness, is often left behind, wondering why they have been passed over, while others, those who are willing to embrace their own power, move ahead. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes particularly unsettling, the idea that success is not about being good or virtuous, but about the willingness to assert one's will, to claim one's place in the world, and to disregard the conventional moral codes that hold most people back. At the end of the day, Nietzsche's terrifying truth about power is that the world rewards those who are willing to be ruthless, who are willing to take risks, and who are not afraid to break the rules when necessary. It is a world where success is not given to the good or the virtuous, but to those who are strong enough to overcome the constraints of traditional morality and to assert their own vision. The challenge, then, is for each individual to decide whether they are willing to embrace this darker, more self-serving side of human nature in order to achieve their own success, or whether they will continue to live by the moral codes that, according to Nietzsche, ultimately prevent them from realizing their true potential. Only those who dare to confront the terrifying truth about power can hope to rise above the rest and achieve greatness in a world driven by competition and dominance.